Welcome to Film Phreeks. This is Justin Llewellyn.
And Eddie Williams.
And tonight we're going to be doing another audio review of one of the most talked about comic book movies of the year so far, and that is Hellboy 2019's the new version, which is directed by Neil Marshall and stars David Harbour, Milla Jovovich, and Ian McShane, and among others. And this is now the third film in the Hellboy franchise. Well, it's a reboot. It's based on the comic book of the same name and the character, and it's a reboot of the other films that were previously directed by Guillermo del Toro. And the film is in regards to it's about basically long ago there was a Blood Queen, Milla Jovovich's character, who wanted to rule the world in darkness, and her basically, not to go into detail, but she was defeated long ago, and she comes back, and she has to be stopped by David Harbour's Hellboy, who is basically half human, half demon, and he has
with on the side of him is two sidekicks.
Yeah, and you got Daniel Day Kim's character, and you also got this other girl who has a history with Hellboy as well from a previous when she was young, and they basically have to stop Milla Jovovich and stop the force of evil. Now, here's some backstory. Now, as we said, this was directed by Neil Marshall, and if you may remember, the guy actually directed previous movies that I'm actually a big fan of. He directed Dog Soldiers from 2002, which I thought was pretty underrated werewolf movie.
Yeah, it's an underrated werewolf movie. One of the most underrated werewolf movies of all time.
Yeah, and then he also directed Descent, which I thought was one of the best horror films of the decade.
Oh yeah, dude, I love The Descent. That was a damn good movie.
Yeah,
bloody as fuck too.
And this movie, like we said, was based on the character of Hellboy from the comic books. And back in 2004, we originally had the first Hellboy, which was directed by Guillermo del Toro and starred Ron Perlman. And when that film came out, I didn't really pay much attention to it when that one first came out, because I wasn't really diving in much of the movie because it just really didn't pique my interest that well. It really wasn't until the second film came out, which was the Golden Army, that I actually saw that in the theater, and lo and behold, I saw that film before I even saw the first movie, and I gotta admit that.
Yeah. So what's pretty fucked up is with the Hellboys, like he said, I don't know what it was, but something just wasn't grabbing me back in the day to go see it. I'm not really familiar with the comic or the character, and I don't know, just something I didn't get to, and I just didn't. In fact, it wasn't until this year I actually watched Hellboys for the first time. So this would be my first time going, unfortunately, and we'll get into it. I had to wait for this piece of shit for it being the first Hellboy theoretical movie I saw. It's just I never knew much of the character, but lo and behold, after checking out the movies, because my girlfriend, she's into them, I found Del Toro's direction and Ron Perlman as Hellboy. I found those movies pretty good.
Yeah, I finally got a chance to watch the first movie, because I saw the second one in theater when it first came out. I finally got a chance to watch the first movie recently, and look, it's been a long time since I've seen the second one, but going by the first one, I like the movie, but I can't admit that it was a little bit slow at times, so it took a while for things to get in. But once it actually
was a good starter.
Yeah, it was a good starter, and actually established the world that they built up in that movie was very groundbreaking, and I actually really liked the way they went with it. And then when the second one, I remember watching that one is actually my favorite from what I remember, because that one they build more with the characters, and they were able to establish more of the world that they surrounded. And plus, I thought, from what I remember, I kind of liked the villain more in the second film than the first movie.
I did. I thought the guy was better in the first one, the second one, than Rasputin or whatever his name was in the first one.
Yeah, so the first two movies, they had their charm with not only having Del Toro's direction, was setting up this world and having fantastical production design and creature design of all these creatures and stuff. But to me, I always found Ron Perlman was like the perfect choice to play Hellboy from the beginning. And when after the second one came out, I really wanted to see a third one. And they talked about for years trying.
Yeah, they talked about doing a third one, but it fell apart or some shit like that.
Yeah, they talked for a long time trying to get it around. It's just that because Del Toro had other projects that he was working on, he never got a chance to come up with a script for it. So unfortunately, the plans fell through after a while.
Ron Perlman is, I think, recently got in the 70s, so he kind of got too old for the part.
Yeah, he basically said that because Del Toro didn't want to come back, he didn't want to do it, so they ended up starting from scratch again and do a full-on reboot. And
what I'd also like to bring up is Ron Perlman. I felt like his Hellboy, there was a lot of charisma and a lot of personality with this character. You know, he loved cats. He was into cigarettes or cigars. I mean, he had things. He had a personality.
Yeah,
and I thought that him and that fucking creature from the Black Lagoon looking thing.
Abe.
They had great chemistry. Like there was like the creatures in those two films. I felt like they were building a pretty neat superhero world.
They were, definitely. And I like the story that they established a lot in the second one, too. With the end in the first one, the way they built around it and everything. And so it really made me wish that they could have done a third one. But unfortunately, the plans fell through and they decided to do a full-on reboot, which on paper, I can see what they were going for. Because in the comics, from what I've heard, the comics are pretty fucking brutal. So I can see the idea they wanted to go with. And from the trailers, I seen...
Yeah, that was probably what they were lacking. The only thing I would say they were lacking really bad. The only thing they lacked really bad on the Del Toros. Del Toro kept the violence grounded. There wasn't much gore and blood and shit.
Yeah.
You know, this guy took it up to new levels.
Yeah, but that's what. So I can see what they were going for with the new one, and based on the trailers, it seemed like it had an interesting idea behind it. But as I started seeing more trailers and everything, it got me a little worried because the way they were going with some of the comedy at first when I was seeing the trailers, it made me feel like it came across as very forced when I was just seeing the trailers for it.
Forced and juvenile and painfully unfunny.
Yeah, and
which we'll see some more detail about that in the actual review. And you know, the trailers. I kind of had what I felt with the new trailer of Hellboy was kind of like what I'm feeling with Dark Phoenix, the new X-Men movie. Something just wasn't grabbing me.
Yeah, that's the same with me. And while I appreciate the idea of them,
hearing the reviews is what really, really killed the mood.
Yeah.
But I mean, for given what it's worth, I mean, if Ron Perlman can't come back, I guess David was probably he's a good choice.
Yeah, he is, so. And I like David Harbour from various stuff, like especially in Stranger Things and everything. So it wasn't necessarily his cast that threw me off. It's really just like what exactly they were going to do since they couldn't get the other two back. And so upon seeing the film, I can honestly say it's been a while since I've seen one of these type movies. This so far is one of the worst fucking comic book movies I've seen in a long time.
Yeah, I'm going to have to agree with you. This movie was a fucking mess. And boy, was I walked out, this movie was fucking trash.
It was. Now, if I'm going to get into any pros out of the way first, I'll say that, well, there's a couple things. First, David Harbour, for what he's given, he at least brings somewhat of a warmth to his performance-wise as Hellboy. It's just that the stuff that's centered around him and what he's given the material to work with, it doesn't fucking work. And David
Harbour, I have no problem with him being Hellboy. In fact, if you put Del Toro and Ron Perlman doesn't come back and you have David Harbour take over, I think it would have done very well with him.
Yeah.
I think he can do the Hellboy. I just think that the writing and the director and everybody who gave him a fucking script was on dope.
Yeah.
I'm telling him, I think it was that shit. It was the writing that really fucked it all up.
Yeah, definitely.
Telling him to say this way and say that line. No, say that line. I think it was that direction's what fucked it up. I don't think David was given a lot of too much leeway of what he wanted to say.
Yeah, definitely. And plus, the other phrase I will say is that because there is something that they lead later on with in regards to basically they set up this plot with the kind of to bring Milla Jovovich's character back. They set up these witches and everything, and the way that these witches look, I will admit, the practical effects they use and the makeup I thought was really good, and it kind of reminded me of something out of the Evil Dead.
I gotta agree with you. They look really, really good. The witches were probably one of my favorite makeup done, like practical looking, and they remind me of the Deadites from Evil Dead.
Yeah, and I'll admit, for what it's worth, for the most part, David Harbour's makeup that they used for Hellboy looks good. It's just that it came across at times that it was a little too jarring, if that makes sense. It's not like
his makeup is good, but at times it kind of reminded me of a fucking drugged up, doped up, fucking used rock band singer.
Yeah.
So he kind of while liking it still was weird at the same time, but I didn't mind it too bad. So, and another thing I like to praise, I will say that it's a pro and a con. This movie does do brutality to the max.
Yeah, it does.
I will say that while I will get into a con about that, the pros, there are good practicals. Mainly it's after the people are killed.
Yeah.
And boy, man, kids getting skinned alive and all kinds of shit.
Yeah, I will admit that when there's a brief 30-second montage that they do, or not a montage, but a scene that happens where we'll get into the details later because there'll be spoilers. Basically, there's something that happens where hell is unleashed on Earth. That was the only time I felt like the creatures that they set up looked good, and they actually had great fucking brutality in those scenes. It reminded me of something out of Dante's Inferno.
Yeah.
And there is at least one action scene I will praise that they did do right, which was the scene where he's fighting these three giants. The way it was shot was pretty cool, but I have a pro and con with that because it really has to do with the way the effects were done. But the scene itself, the way it plays out.
Whenever you saw the bodies that they were eating and chewing on, that shit was fucking brutal.
Yeah, it was. So there are some decent effects that they do in this film. It's just that it's far in between. And for what it's worth, Ian McShane, I didn't mind so much. I mean, I like him in a lot of films, so his presence is always likable on screen. But again, his character, we'll get into his con later, his character is just there for exposition.
Yeah, exposition, and that's a big fucking deal because he actually replaces the original guy as
John
father.
Hurt.
So I have a problem with that.
Yeah, he replaced...
You fucking throw him like he's a side character that just has a few lines here and there and then something at the end. That kind of bothers the fuck out of me.
Yeah.
Which I really don't have much really to say about pros other than what we mentioned. So here we go and get into our cons.
Yeah, we have a lot.
Oh my god, there's a shitload. I don't know where to fucking begin with this.
Let's start beginning with the...
plot is so fucking messy.
This is... Okay, so...
Just blended. It's like... You throw your entire fucking food in a fridge, in a blender, and just throw it everywhere in your living room. Yeah. All around the place. That's the fucking script to this movie.
Yeah, so the movie actually, where do we even begin? It already has a problem in the beginning because in the beginning we see, and there's going to be spoilers by the way, in the beginning we see that it takes place in the King Arthur era, which is interesting the way at the first second they introduce it, but at the same time, when they first introduce it, this backstory they introduced for Milla Jovovich's character is so fucking glossed over and rushed that it's just a quick scene where she gets defeated and then it cuts to years later.
Yeah, it's your standard villain, really, is what it is. They introduce her for like a split second. Ooh, she's a badass, boom. There's that thing that puts her in her place for about 10,000 years type situation. And it's like, then you cut in the modern times. And I guess because of Del Toro already kind of went into the origins of Hellboy, I still have a problem with this because this is like a totally rebuilt boot. This is like building this was supposed to build a new franchise out of this. We start with Hellboy, where he's been doing his thing for about 20, 30 years.
Yeah, like this is supposed.
There's like no getting to know the character. It's just like boom, thrown at you.
And
Hellboy, he's already a professional. Everybody in the world is friends with him.
And we already have a problem with this from the get-go. Yeah, it's almost like we had to watch 2 other films, which, again, if this would have been the third part, I can understand that. If it was still Ron Perlman's Hellboy, I could buy that. But the fact that you set up this character and have no fucking build-up and have just already put him in the grasp, we're already to assume who he is.
Yeah. And like we said, Mila Jovovich is the queen, the Blood Queen, and she is established as the main villain. So we go literally most of the movie without her, and this is basically becomes like similar to like Ghostbusters, where they just go and just defeat something and they go to the next job.
Oh, it was calling me flashbacks to fucking Ghostbusters 2016, especially one scene we'll get into later.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm not saying it.
No, I mean the plot structure and everything reminds me of that too.
The original Ghostbusters, it works because that's what it's made for.
No, I'm saying the reboot.
This one, I'm establishing it as in like we get rid of our fucking villain, our main villain that we established in the beginning of the movie. And basically, Hellboy, he's just going from job to job.
Yeah, and that's another part we got to get into
because this gets repetitive.
And that's another factor. This was giving me a headache already from the fucking beginning. So we see him already in, I believe it's in Tijuana or whatever, and he's basically seeing like his friend that used to be in the paranormal bureau investigation, and he becomes like this winged creature and stuff that he fights in this wrestling match, and immediately like afterwards he defeats him and he tells him that basically the end is coming and all that. And then the
end is coming, and there, again, and I'll have a problem we'll talk about more in this film that has this issue. He's a friend of Hellboy. And that's another issue I have is there's people that pop up throughout these movies that bring up like, Hellboy, I haven't seen you in many years. I'm like, God damn, they're bringing a lot of fucking people that we don't even know. Because we don't even know this Hellboy.
Well, and that too, because in fact, in this one, I have even more of a problem because with this Hellboy, he has no fucking personality. All he does is...
this one, they get rid of the fucking goddamn cat. The whole, like, personality, he likes cats and cigars and shit like that. He literally does not fucking have any personality, except for fucking probably bitching and complaining.
And also
really,
and killing
with Hellboy in this one because all he did was whine and bitch.
Yeah, that's all he does. He complains about shit, and then he goes through the rest of the film just hunting demons and shit, and that's all he does. At least now I'm not trying to make comparisons, but you have to give something like a development for your character if you're going to build a story out of this at first, and they don't do that here. We're just to assume already know who the fuck he is.
And like you going back to all the guys he's defeating, you get giants, then you start getting witches, then you start getting these like jaguar looking things, and you have this, and I'm going to get in this because this one was probably what pissed me off the most. I'll get to this in a second. You get all these like fucking like things, I guess you could say they're to add on to the story to make it drag longer, or just, I don't know what they were doing, but they were just introducing all this shit going on, all this chaos, and I will say about 30-40 minutes in, I was completely lost. Following, who am I supposed to follow here?
And it doesn't help either.
Think lead is a villain.
Yeah, and also it doesn't help that this movie has it gave me a nauseating, almost, not a headache, but it was really like confusing me, like how all this shit kept happening conveniently, because the editing in this makes no fucking sense. We have scenes where...
exactly. The editing, like you see them in one, like fighting one thing, then it's like they're back at the office and then they're back into something else. I'm like... How
did they get there so fucking quick?
Yeah, I'm like, why is like this so skippy?
Yeah, and that's another thing too. Behind the scenes,
it feels like when you go go and try to bootleg a movie and you didn't get the whole movie.
And that's one thing I will say that the film probably would have helped better, because from what I heard behind the scenes, there was some interference that happened where the director, Neil Marshall, unfortunately didn't get final cut. And it did really seem like the studio really interfered with the film a lot, and the editing was just completely out of control, and it felt like we had scenes that were either missing or just not established at all. And it just skips over that.
One of my biggest fucking complaints. This probably infuriated me more than anything. This is what really fucking pissed me off. So we're following this Bebop motherfucker, and he's this pig, kind of similar to Bebop from the Turtles, and he plays a character arc that happened where he was a little tiny pig, and he would possess babies, and that goes into and introducing a character we'll get into in a minute. And he was able to, it was basically he was playing Constantine in that scene for some reason. He uses this iron thing and it makes him come out, and then he runs off, and this was like years before. Well, this movie is the fucking pig. He's now growing up, and this becomes a personal issue between him and Hellboy, and this is the reason why the Blood Queen comes back.
Well, and
if you guys remember, we had a movie years ago called Amazing Spider-Man 2, where he had the fucking Electro Man, played by Jamie Foxx, whose purpose, the whole plot of him was because his name was not mentioned. He didn't remember him.
Yeah.
In this one, they do that with the whole, like, well, not like that, but because you burned me.
Yeah. Because he had a grudge.
So that's your basic essential plot, is this pig resurrects one of the evilest witches, demons, whatever you want to call her, because of a fucking personal issue.
And we'll get into that later, because that also becomes a fucking plot hole, because this whole arc goes fucking nowhere. This whole plot is fucking abandoned later on.
And not only that, all he comes off as somebody so easy to probably smack around. He feels like a goddamn side villain.
He reminds me of that fucking dude from
But if the plot goes based off of what his emotions, then he's technically the fucking main villain, even though he's not even focused as one.
You know what that reminds me of? If you remember that pig, warthog-looking dude from Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, imagine taking that character and turning him into the fucking main bad guy, and having Rita be basically the fucking sideline and just using her as for evil. That's basically how they did it in this movie.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, what the fuck?
Sure, better thing. Remember the fucking how atrocious Bane was in Batman Forever?
Yeah. Or no, Batman Robin.
Batman Robin. That fucking Nacho Libre Bane.
Yeah.
Could you imagine him being the leader in that movie?
Yeah.
That's basically what this was. He picks some fucking off the wall dude, and he just like, oh, you burned me 20 years ago, so I'm resurrecting the queen.
You won't die.
He's established that because the queen brings it up.
Yeah, and
he resurrected me because of that.
And it doesn't help either that.
Oh my god!
Well, and
here's another plot hole. The plot hole is at the beginning when King Arthur killed her. He killed her, and they had to spread her body parts all around so the body parts couldn't find each other. They abandoned that fucking plot. She uses this. You have this whole movie where this Bebop motherfucker is going around looking for her parts and putting her together, but she's rendered useless when he finds all her parts. She needs witches to fucking actually say a line, like Chucky or something, Duan Dembella type shit.
Yeah.
Then she can fucking. Oh, and she still can't do anything. She has to walk to that fucking tree, cut it herself. So it's like, if she had to go through all that shit, then you probably could have buried all her fucking remains by each other, and more than likely nothing would happen.
Yeah. Yeah, I hear you, man. Plus,
yeah, that's one thing. This movie has a problem with introducing plots and then not giving a fuck about the plots. It's like, hey, we're gonna introduce this for a second. Nah, let's abandon that. How about that? Yeah, let's start that. No, let's abandon that. I'm like, motherfucker.
Yeah.
Those could have been the witches.
Yeah.
That was fine.
That's what I'm saying. It would have been a lot better if it was focused on the witches. In fact, the movie kind of takes like a Hansel and Gretel kind of approach.
Book, so if somebody in the comments can answer this for us, is Hellboy supposed to feel like a folklore fairy tale that kids read, like Hansel and Gretel, and Alice in Wonderland-ish type thing? Fairy tale, or the House with the Clock in the Walls with the walking house? Because that's what I felt like I was watching. Was trying to be a fairy tale.
Yeah, that's what it almost seemed like. But it doesn't help either that the whole film, like the way it's not only the way it's plotting is just from going from point A to point B just to take everything down. And a lot of these action scenes they set up, well, we'll get to the fucking climax that they set up, is very short-lived. And it doesn't help either that Milla Jovovich I like as an actress, but here, every fucking line in the way that she delivers them reminds me something out of Mortal Kombat Annihilation. If you remember that movie, if you remember Katana's mother in that, it reminded me straight out of fucking that movie.
Her delivery was cringy.
It was.
Very cringy. Not only that, let's get into the CGI of this film. Well, I said there are practicals. Unfortunately, a lot of the death scenes that were cool looking are actually practicals are done after the killings. And I will tell you, I've seen some atrocious ass fucking CGI. You have no excuse being a theoretical film, especially Hellboy, something big, and using the same shit I've seen in fucking Lake Placid 5.
Oh.
CGI in this was oh my god, it was fucking bad.
It was.
You can see the green screen like a motherfucker. I'm talking about the helicopter scenes. Milla Jovovich's throat, head getting chopped off was digital blood.
Yep.
While there were some cool tearing of people apart scenes were cool, a lot of that was computer generated. You can see it from, it's bad CGI. I'm not talking about, I think Terminator did better CGI than this. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
That bad.
But that's also goes with the fact.
You can see, remember like the ending credits where it's panning out from them? And then like the scene where the witch is on Mila's characters on that hill, that black hill. You can tell they're standing on a green screen.
Yep, it looked fucking horrible. And plus, also, this kind of goes back earlier. That scene where Hellboy's fighting those giants. While I said that the film is the only part that I thought was good shot, the way it used the action scene there. Unfortunately, the fucking green screen is so visible, it really took me out of that moment. That would have been epic.
The one part that I think that I laughed at because the CGI was so bad was the part where Mila's eyeball came out.
Oh yeah, I remember that part.
That?
I will admit,
that looked horrible. Holy shit!
The first time we see the pig character, I will admit I was balls out fucking laughing the first time I saw it because of how shitty the CGI was. I was like, I don't know why. I found that unintentionally hilarious.
Like this is our antagonist, or whatever you like to call him.
Yeah.
This is like, in a way, kind of it. I mean, you have Mila's character at the beginning and at the fucking end to be the king, the closing big boss. She has disappeared throughout the whole movie. This movie is just nothing but them going for, like, taking on jobs.
Yeah.
Established. I get you guys work for a girl. I get that. We're not fucking stupid.
And it also doesn't help either that almost about 70-80% of the film is a lot of fucking exposition dialogue. It's dialogue where characters explain their backstories and we see flashbacks of said character. Then we have to get another scene where they're fighting a demon or whatever. Then we get another character's backstory. And they do this like 4 or 5 fucking times. You get it with Hellboy.
Oh, let's get into this part right here. So, we get his new sidekicks. They get rid of, well, until the end, they got rid of the fucking cool Black Lagoon guy that we're known for in the Del Toros. So he's not in this movie. We get this fucking girl that abruptly shows up because she saves him in that scene with the big giants.
Yeah.
And they wait till later to give us the backstory, and basically their only connection is basically when he was playing Constantine, he was talking about how he had to go and and get her unpossessed by Bebop looking motherfucker.
Yeah.
That's the connection. That is literally their fucking connection. And really, she's a boring ass character. Anyways.
She is too.
And that Asian dude, man, talk about trying to steal from Predator.
Oh yeah, I saw that. Like I saw when you mentioned me that, when I was like, what the fuck? So he has his backstory set up where he's in the fucking jungle.
And then he's a fucking jaguar?
Yeah.
What the fuck?
Yeah, this is okay because the first time he talks about, because he has his backstory where he says he was in the jungle with his team and he was getting killed by a prey and he became the prey. I was like, is this fucking Predator? And then we see this CGI jaguar comes out. I'm like, oh fuck. And then we see later on it's pretty.
Basically, they take the reminisce of what a werewolf would do to you, but with a jaguar. I'm like, you gotta be fucking kidding me.
Yeah, and I fucking called that foreshadowing they did later when he actually becomes a jaguar.
I knew that's what he was. I'm like, oh my god, man, this is pathetic.
Yeah.
Shit. Here's a thing that they really fucked up on. Where was the relationship with him and his father? That
was a lot missing too. We only get like one or two scenes where they talk about, their bantering and everything, but we really get, unlike and again, I'm not trying to make comparisons, but in the first Hellboy film with Braun Perlman, we at least got reason to buy the relationship with him and John Hurt's character, because for one, the event that took place in that movie was actually set in Germany. In this version, Hellboy is not part of that operation. In fact, we get a whole scene where they talk about that scene, where if you remember the first Hellboy, the Nazis were looking for Rasputin and all that. Were trying to summon power or whatever, or seek power. And this one they reference that, but unfortunately that has nothing to do with Hellboy's where he was from. So they skipped that altogether.
And not only that, I don't even think it had any kind of connection to the father. He was
in that expedition, but he didn't find Hellboy. I don't think it didn't show him there, so that's why
basically Rasputin in this version has nothing to do with the Hellboy world. It's just, and not only that, they actually carbon copy that fucking scene.
They do from the first movie.
I'm like, oh my god, man! I'm like, now you're just fucking lazy here. There's no, And there's some other fucking things I want to complain about.
Well, the other thing was the it doesn't help either that it also tends to rip off.
The dad. Go back to the dad again. When the father died in the first movie, that shit was emotional.
It was.
This one, I didn't give a fuck.
I didn't either.
They didn't know each other.
Yeah, it leads to our climax because the whole plot basically surrounds that Milla Jovovich's character is having to piece herself together to seek out this tree to bring her in pieces back to life, and she ends up getting back together and everything, and she ends up causing havoc. Which from the way it sets it up, it seemed like it was going somewhere interesting because of the way it was going.
She was trying to brainwash
Hellboy into basically joining her.
Yeah. Oh, should we go into detail about Hellboy being a descendant of fucking King Arthur?
Yeah, I was gonna say. I thought that was so fucking lazy, and also they ripped.
What?
Yeah, that was stupid. Now, I kind of have to apologize to King Arthur: Legend of Sword. I thought this movie did this whole sequence of King Arthur and everything a lot fucking worse than that movie did, because they actually rip off that entire segment.
They take something so classical and shove them in a universe that makes no sense for any of them to be related. It makes no fucking sense.
It doesn't. And not to mention, okay, here's one thing I will say is that because the whole purpose is that he has to seek out, because he finds this cave where Merlin comes back and everything abruptly, and he tells him that he has to use Excalibur. Well, at first, when Hellboy is trying to take Excalibur from the sword out of the stone, at first he doesn't want to because he sees a vision that he's going to basically become the devil on hell on earth and everything. So on the idea...
Yeah, because Milla Jovovich, what she does is she's trying to get her... She wants to be with him, and she's the queen and he's the king.
Yeah.
and basically goes around, and they're going to rule and kill on hell on earth and stuff. And they actually do a scene where it shows like a dream sequence where he sees where he's actually like hell's on earth, where the world's on fire. And I swear to God, this looked like a scene out of Little Nicky.
It did.
Van Winkler to come out with bees.
or Rodney Dangerfield saying, "Even
like,
hell I get no respect."
Where's Popeyes is the fucking shiznit?
Yeah.
I was like, this looks like Little Nicky.
Even at hell I get no respect.
Yeah.
But
You know.
But
I mean, like, seriously, it's like, and then, like, you know it ain't gonna lead to anything like that. And then, like, I thought, well, at first I kind of thought, like, when she actually goes in action, that's what it's gonna start looking like. But actually, they don't do fire. They actually do gray shit.
they do. It looked like some shit out of the fucking Mummy from a couple years ago.
Yeah, where she's walking around, everybody's, like, fucking turning, and they call it the Black Plague or whatever.
Yeah.
And then you had this dumb scene with this, and it just felt like it was just thrown in there just for being kind of, what do you call that, self-aware, because they do three things in this film that try to do that self-aware shit where they look at the camera type thing.
Yeah.
And they did that scene where that fucking old woman pulled a gun on her. That made no sense.
I know. And plus,
Other than he's protecting them from the thing because she shows up. Like, this happens so abruptly, she finds where the B-roll's at. So,
yeah, and then it all pretty much leads them to this church that they go to, where after she's taken over everything, and then they end up fighting the peak, the guy, like we were saying earlier, and this time he's a lot bigger and everything, and he's got his full power, which becomes pretty much fucking pointless, because after he's like kicking everyone's ass and stuff, after he's kicking Hellboy's ass and stuff, he just gets killed by Mila Jovovich, and his whole like complete purpose was fucking pointless.
You know what her purpose was? Why she killed him? Bebop looking dude, and she stopped him because she's in love with Hellboy.
Yeah.
She goes, "Oh, you're not supposed to do that." And he just told you all movie that's what he was doing. I want to pay back.
Yeah, but it went nowhere.
Again, you forget plot earlier, and you're going to something else.
Yeah, and then pretty much we have it to where Hellboy ends up finally pulling the sword out of the stone after he gets brainwashed by her. And he ends up seeing that he pulls Excalibur out.
This is the part I laughed. The part where, you know, she tricks him. Well, before he pulls it, she slit Ian's throat, and he dies. And, you know, he does this, like, weird... This is actually on David Harbour's fault right here. That cry was cringy.
Yeah, it kind of was.
I'm like, ooh. And then whenever he gets ready, you know, he gets brainwashed for like 2 seconds, and then this girl summons a power where the dead can talk out of her own self, but you can see the person that you know that's dead. And I will tell you right now, this was the worst Photoshop. That Ian's head looked so photoshopped on that fucking smoke thing.
Yeah,
it made me laugh.
It reminded me of
it was so fun.
It reminded me of the scene out of Marvel's Avengers: Infinity War, where it showed Hulk's Bruce Banner's head on top of the body, where it looked like that shit. But
another one, Spider-Man 2, when they put what's his face in the rhino,
Paul Giamatti,
and their head just looked photoshopped.
Yeah.
That dude, when his body was like moving around, his head was just jiggling around. I'm like, oh.
Oh no, it reminded me of the fucking Rock's, like, if you remember The Mummy Returns, where it had the Rock's like face on the scorpion, it looked like that. I was like, scorpion?
Yeah, I was like, damn. I didn't know that. I didn't know they managed in 2019 to put Mummy 2's fucking Scorpion King to fucking shame.
Yep. But
hey, guess what? This movie's CGI didn't even age a minute. A minute past was already expired.
Yep. And then.
But anyways, at the end, after he gets out the spell, and Ian's like, remember me, I loved you as a son, and which he had no relationship from the get-go, but okay. And then he snaps out, and then he kills her, and it's over.
Well, before that, I wanted to say this. There is one interesting thing I liked, kind of. It's the 30-second part where we see the demons come out of hell and shit when he actually gets the sword and becomes, like, devilish. That's the only scene I thought was kind of cool with the monsters. Because they actually...
when they were killing all the people.
Yeah, because they look like some out of fucking Dante's Inferno.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there was that at least. But yeah, he ends up...
Yeah, he killed her fast, and
he just fucking chopped her head off.
Basically, they're talking to each other like they all got good relationships, and then it starts panning out far away, and then it takes us to this kind of pre-credit scene 6 months later in Siberia, and these three are suddenly throwing one-liners at each other's, and it's weak one-liners.
Yeah,
really weak.
And I
was like, and then they started trying to be clever by playing fucking, what was it, Motley Crue?
Yeah, Motley Crue's Kickstart My Heart.
Yeah, where they're going, yeah, and trying to do that like they think they made an epic movie.
Yeah, I'm like, no.
All these guys' relationship is trash.
It is, and plus also the climax, right? Like we're going back just for a second. That was so fucking anticlimactic. It wasn't even a climax because you built up Mila Jovovich's character to so much to the point that you don't even give her a good fucking like epic showdown. She just gets killed in like 2 seconds.
Yeah, it's like equivalent to fucking, and you can't even. You're about to get off, but then it disappears.
Yeah. So
it's like that was it.
Yeah, and then we get in this.
Get one drip.
And then we pretty much, while they're in this, while they're in Siberia, they end up going to this like tank thing after they kill all these guys and stuff, and they discover, well, even though we say he wasn't in the movie, he actually is. We see his hand, and it shows Abe from the first movie, from the first Hellboy, the creature from the Black Lagoon looking dude, the fish guy.
Yeah, the Black Lagoon thing comes at the end, and at this point, I didn't give a fuck. Oh, he did say something like that. When he killed her, he goes, well, that's it, or some shit like that. I'm like,
oh, you should have quit while you're ahead. You should have quit while you're ahead.
Yeah, you should quit while you're ahead. That's what he said. You should quit while you're ahead. And I said, thanks for the advice, because I'm about to walk out.
Yep. Yeah. And then there was a post-credit scene that they show.
Like we said, this movie was fucking just, it was dog shit. And people were right. It deserves the criticism.
Oh, yeah, dude. I mean, and also there was a post-credit scene that they did that I didn't see because I walked out of the theater after the credits started. And apparently it was another scene where basically it shows that he ends up getting visited. He goes to the grave of his dad, and he gets visited by the ghost of that Lobster Johnson dude from the World War II era. And then
well, I don't give a shit because the movie already bombed and they ain't making a sequel.
Yeah, and then...
But it amazes me that this director, known for pretty fucking gruesome movies, and he's good with practicals, went fucking CG'd on this.
Yeah, definitely.
For the most part. And he's made some clever films, and I'm not familiar with anything else you didn't mention, but I would say this is by far his worst movie.
Yeah, I would say so too, because as much as like I love The Descent, and it's been a long time since I remember watching Dog Soldiers, I'll have to revisit that one someday.
Movies have practical, 100% bloody.
That's what I'm saying.
Everything's gruesome, and they have good story.
Yeah, The Descent I thought was like
entertaining.
Yeah, there are, and it just. But then again, I don't really falter him as necessarily because I will admit that unfortunately the movie wasn't finished by him, so it seemed like there was a lot of the film that was done that was out without his vision in mind. So I don't really necessarily blame the whole movie on him. I really just blame the overall movie itself, like as a problem. And because from the writing, the fucking direction is sloppy. The fucking like the characters are so fucking paper thin. And this, to me, I haven't finished Fan Four Stick, but it's on that level as a fucking boring. There is nothing to this story that I found interesting as it went along, besides a couple of scenes or something. They should have called
this movie Hell Shit.
Yeah. So, with that being said, while there is some likable stuff...
What the Hellboy is what it should have been. What the Hellboy?
Yeah, while there was some likable stuff in
title,
this...
You know how they do titles sometimes? Like the Golden Army?
Uh-huh.
It should have been, what the Hellboy is this shit?
Yeah. Definitely. So it makes me just wish that we lived in an alternate universe where Del Toro and Perlman would have came back to do a third one. But unfortunately, we didn't. So I'll always
Doctor Strange or fucking Thanos would have snapped his fingers.
Yeah, although I can always go back and watch the first two again, and always enjoy those. So with that being said, while there was there was a couple things that I didn't mind too much of the movie. This movie was definitely pretty fucking atrocious, and with that, I'm giving this is only hanging by a thread on a very extremely low disaster rating on the Film Freaks meter.
Yeah, this is extremely low disaster rating. I almost want to give this an F flatline. That's pretty much almost on this. This is like D minus 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 minus. It is, and that was because the witch thing was actually kind of cool.
Yeah.
And some other that I mentioned earlier. The witch thing was actually pretty interesting, even though they didn't have much development. They were fucking creepy as shit, and they would have went with that kind of like Hansel and Gretel-ish type thing. That would have been that would have been awesome.
Yeah, it would have been really cool.
Yeah, so I'm being nice, giving this a extremely low disaster rating on the Film Freaks meter.
Fair enough. For those of you who have also seen Hellboy and also the other Hellboy films and also the comics that the movies are based on, let us know in the comments below of what you thought about them. And if you like what you see here, you can feel free to like and subscribe to our channel and check out some of our other reviews here and at our website at filmfreaks.com. And we'll be seeing you in our next review. We'll see you later.